Do you know someone who's been incarcerated? Have you ever actually asked them their story instead of judging them on that one fact? Because 95% of incarcerated people eventually leave prison and come home. They are our neighbors, our coworkers, our family members.
And if you're wondering, why is this relevant? Well, here's why this is relevant to you right now. This administration has made tough on crime the centerpiece of its second term. Among other things, reviving the federal death penalty with actual firing squads, pushing back against cashless bail reform, and pressuring prosecutors nationwide to seek harsher sentences, asterisk here, when of course it benefits them and or the MAGA agenda. After all, the message from Washington is loud and clear. Punishment first, everything else second. But here's a question nobody, Washington or otherwise, seems to be asking. What happens after?
It's a great question because how we treat people when they come home, whether we see them as people or permanently as their worst mistake, says as much about us as any policy coming out of Washington. So today we're going straight to a conversation that is one of our favorites of all time on this podcast with someone who's lived both sides of this story. Marcus Bullock, CEO of Flickshop, who was incarcerated as a teenager and built a company helping formerly incarcerated people stay connected to their families and rebuild their lives. This is a conversation about what, quote, law and order actually looks like on the ground and in people, not just in the abstract. Welcome to What Do You Mean By That? We are your hosts, Sarah and me, Sasha.
My name is Marcus Bullock, and I am the CEO and founder of Flickshop. We built the technology that keeps families connected to their incarcerated loved ones. Flickshop is a mobile application that allows our users to take a picture, add some quick text, press send, and we print and ship real tangible picture on a postcard to any person in any prison anywhere in the country. The reason why we built this technology is because social media, emailing and texting and all of the ways that we digest content and communications with our family, our friends, the way that we see the new dog on Instagram of our nephew or niece, their college graduations, the cousin or the best friend or the husband in prison doesn't have an opportunity to experience that. We're trying to figure out now how to not only help connect family members, but also businesses and organizations that want to hire people that are coming out of prison. The reason why this is important to me is because I went to prison when I was a 15-year-old kid. I carjacked a man in a shopping mall parking lot with my 16-year-old best friend, and we both got sentenced to 8 years inside of adult maximum security prisons. So as a 15-year-old, this has got an 8-year sentence. I was, obviously shooken for not only for my life, but for my future, and knowing that everything had shifted from that point forward. My mom saw that sense of depression when I was around 17, and I knew I had 6 years left, and I didn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. And she chipped in and started sending me pictures and letters for the remaining 6 years every day to give me a window to the world. It kept me really connected to her and my family members in a very interesting way, as well as my friends who grew up in those cells with. So when we came home, we knew we wanted to figure out a way to be able to replicate that level of love that my mom was able to display for me. And we wanted to build scalable tech that can do that. Fast forward to today, and I'm really excited that we're able to accomplish that goal by connecting millions of families around the country.
Everything you just said ties into the fact that people are still human. We can talk about some of the languaging that we've used until this point and how we need to eliminate words like felon and ex-con, and we replace them with new words. The point of it is we are so used to labeling people who are in prison as other and as labeling by the thing they did wrong. And you are humanizing all of that. And it's so important because there's, according to the stats, 2.5 million people currently in prison. 95% of incarcerated people are going to be released. And yet so many people, me included, probably lots of listeners have not been really given a chance to talk to returning citizens. Certainly not, this openly. So I'm really glad that you're here. Let's dive in.
Absolutely. I'm super pumped about it. I'm glad that you threw some of those numbers out there. You're right. There's 600,000 people that are coming home from prison every year, and they've been relegated to a new caste system of folks who are less than. And we want to not only be able to bring that humanity back for the people, the returning citizens that are coming home, but even well before they come home, how are we being thoughtful about preparing those humans for the world ahead of them? Today is a good start for a bunch of people that will learn about ways that they can help contribute to that. Let's jump in. Let's do it.
That's awesome. I think we wanted to start a little bit with your own story because I heard you speak about that moment where, like you're a 15-year-old boy, you're in this courtroom, you have carjacked this car with your friend, and now you're standing in front of that judge?
Absolutely. That was a very interesting time back in those days. Let me tell you, sitting in that courtroom, it was interesting, right? Because, you mentioned like my brain, I was there. They say I was there, right? But my brain wasn't on anything that was going to court. In fact, like I didn't even understand what was happening, what they were talking about in the courtroom, right? Like just a few weeks later, I'm in 10th grade. It's my sophomore year in high school. I have vocabulary words, right? Let's paint a picture. I have vocabulary words. And now there's a new vocabulary that I have to learn in addition to the vocabulary words that I thought that I was going to have to memorize out of my earth science class, right? And so now I'm learning new words like concurrent and consecutive and arraignment and Miranda rights. When they first told me, they was like, yo, did you get your Miranda? I'm like, who's Miranda? Right? I had no idea who Miranda was. And they talking about like, you have to remain silent. The entire time, all I was talking about was I want to just call my mother. Whether or not remaining silent about a crime, like forget remaining silent. I have the right to remain silent. I have the right. I want to call my mom and go home because, again, my girlfriend just promised to buy me a Kenneth Cole t-shirt, and it was winter break, and I was going to be able to come back to school. That was where my brain was. Even during all of the court hearings, even during my sentencing, when they were starting to give me my sentence, and he's giving me, 5 years for this and 3 years for that, and and he's adding them all together. And I could do math. Like I'm in 10th grade, so I could do very good algebra, even probably geometry. You know what I mean? Depending on which day of the week you caught me, and if I went to class at second period or not. But I'm in a courtroom, and now there's a new math, right? And there's a new math that determines the rest of my life, my fate. And the judge asked me, do you understand what's happening to you, young man? I'm like, yes, I do understand what's happening to me. Because what I'm going to say, no, I don't understand what's happening to me. So I said, yes, I understand what's happening to me. But, Your Honor, I have a question. Does you mean to tell me I'm not going to be able to go home for Christmas? And that's when my mom just started breaking down like, my baby doesn't even understand what's happening right now.
When you and your friend made the decision, did you have like consequences?
Absolutely. I knew carjacking was wrong. Like I wasn't stupid. I knew goodness well, like pulling a gun out on the man, telling him to get out of his car, getting into it and pulling off was definitely 100% wrong. In fact, probably enough, like if that had happened to my mom, I would be like ready to flip out and be like, who in the world did this and how can we figure out how to solve this problem immediately, right? So I knew that. What it was interesting during that time was that there was a blurred line in between what I knew to be right and wrong and what the legal ramifications were behind the decision that I had made. Whatever the punishment was never going to be fitting for any type of crime. And so whether it be me, not bringing home a report card and getting it signed by my mom and me signing her signature on my own, fighting someone at school because I just wanted to intervene because I saw somebody bullying another kid, riding in a stolen car with my best friend on the way to a skating ring while smoking weed, carjacking someone in a shopping mall parking lot, pulling off and joyriding with my best friend on the way home with the plans to go to church on Sunday morning. All of those were a part of the same class of what happens on a random Friday night. Whether or not we chose to go with one or the other was simply was predicated on what was presented to me at the time. The presentation of, what to do, like the good things that we were doing, like, my mom would put me in an oratorical contest and I was an orator, at my church. The basketball tournaments that, like all of those things were just another group of things that were presented to me. My brain now today is able to draw very, very clear distinguishing black and white lines on the things I were presented with that I probably should have allocated more of my attention to. But back in those days, it was like, you can't be what you can't see. And what was in front of me was riding with my friends and smoking weed and then stolen a car on the way to a skating ring, going to go talk to girls.
I think that that's so powerful about, because I think when people hear about prison and people who commit crimes and they think about, the crime and they think about people should be punished for crimes, but they don't, going back to what we've been talking about, sort of don't reflect on the humanity of that situation. And you are in each moment. And, a 15-year-old boy being faced with a whole bunch of different options at any given time. You're a 15-year-old boy, so you understand right from wrong, but there is an underlying humanity in who you are throughout this. I think that people tend to push to the side when you think about punishment and doing something wrong. I want to go back to that moment in the courtroom then when, you ask the judge, are you going to be going home for Christmas? And, when that sort of sinks in that you're not going home, like, how does that feel for you?
It didn't sink in until until December the 26th. And then it was like, all right, well, that was a tough day because they just didn't figure out how to let me go yesterday, but they'll definitely figure out how to let me go before the new year. Because clearly there's no way on God's green earth they're going to let me bring a new year in away from my family. Especially once they find out, they figure out that I miss Christmas. Once it just hears that I miss Christmas, they're going to be like, wait a minute, there's no way, right? And they're going to come and pick me up on New Year's. And then you know what happens? New Year's Eve, everyone is in a cell in a block, and they're like, yo, it's about to be New Year's, and people are celebrating New Year's, and I'm looking around like, what the heck are we celebrating New Year's for, right? But in my mind, I'm like, yo, y'all celebrating New Year. Y'all saying, Happy New Year. It's going to be 1997. In my world, it's like, well, as soon as, New Year's morning, like they start releasing people, I think around about 8 o'clock. My mom will be here 8 o'clock in the morning, and somebody will make sure that she knows where to come and pick me up from and what kind of paperwork she needs to sign to let them know she'll be going home. And then at 12 o'clock noon, I'm like, so I'm probably going to get that afternoon release because now it's like 12 and they just bought lunch. And I'm not going to eat that bologna and cheese, that cold, dry bologna and cheese sandwich because I'm going to eat, when I get home. My mom will cook me some food. And so at 6 p.m. when they bring dinner, I'm like, all right, well, I'm definitely not eating that nasty baked chicken. Like, that don't even look like chicken. And my mom would be mad because I know she made a big pot of spaghetti and she's going to be mad. I'm not going to be hungry. So I'll eat that tomorrow when I get home. Tomorrow morning for breakfast, we repeat that process over and over and over and over again. And then interestingly enough, it was really my naivety and it was my delirium that allowed me to even remain sane during those first years when I probably should have collapsed. Because my brain, I just I couldn't mentally accept what was happening. Psychologically, something wasn't clicking to say, dude, nah, they not playing, man. You about to have to do this 8 years, homeboy. It wasn't clicking quite yet.
It's interesting to hear you talk about the psychological impact, the denial at first, and what it takes to get through. I definitely want to come back to a day in the life inside, but one thing I am really curious about, for psychology and philosophy perspective, right? I think a lot of people beat themselves up for things that they've done and they define themselves by that one moment or that thing in their life. Do you think that, I guess this is a two-part question, do you get over something like that? Do you identify yourself by that and get over it, or do you not and it becomes part of your identity? Does a mistake define you? And then also, how do you respond to people who say, well, you did something wrong and you should be punished for it?
Yeah, I think that, that's a great question. Let's go with the first one first. The first one, so I'm going to speak for me, right? The millions of people, 70 million people in the country, the U.S. that have a criminal record. I ain't going to speak for all of them, but I will speak for, I'm one of them. My mother would say yo, I'm such a statistic. Anyway, do I identify? Nah, I don't, right? I think that one of the reasons why I think that most people do is because they get hung up when they come home from prison. It's because, people, they beat it in you. Not only do the people before you come home beat it in you that you have a felony on your record, that you, sir, you, ma'am, you are a convicted felon, right? And then, not only do they beat it on, but, and you're constantly reminded of it every single day, you know what I mean? When you whether or not you want to go apply for a job, going to go look for an apartment, going to go try to go, I can't coach my son's basketball team, right? My HOA, I can't put my name on my HOA in my neighborhood, and only my wife's name can go on it, because if they found out, they might be like, yo, nah. And they love me. They're like, oh, Marcus, he's the CEO of something. We don't even know what it is. The CEO of something, right? You know what I mean? But the moment that they found out, it's like, oh, wait a minute. They did some more Googling, and they were like, wait a minute, right? Should we allow our kids to play with his kids? Because what do they do? What do they learn? What do they teach their children, right? And so, that's just what it is, right? And so people, when you have that cloud that's over your head and folks are beating it into you, sometimes it's hard to chip away at it and get it off your shoulder. And whether or not you want to get up every day and fight against it and brush your teeth and wash your face and think that the new day is going to be bright and your future is going to be perfect. And then before 9:30, someone else reminds you that you do have a felony on your record. It's challenging to walk through the rest of the day not repeating that you have a felony on your record, which allows you to go through the rest of the week saying, I have a felony on my record, and that's going to be able to cause barriers, which goes into the rest of the month that says, not only do I have a felony on my record that's going to cause barriers, but no one wants to give me a job or let me live here. That lets you go through the rest of the year saying, not only do I have a felony, I got barriers, I can't get a job, and people want to live around the neighborhood, but I'm officially a part of the social outcast that people, and then you know what you do? You look for others. You look for your tribe, because that's what humans do. We look for our tribe. And then when you find your tribe, you ask yourself, what do you do every day as a part of the tribe? And unfortunately, the tribe typically looks the same. And then they end up mirroring what the tribe has done, causing that 76% recidivism rate that we read about that happens to people within the first 3 years of their release from prison. Now, one of the things I think that broke me apart from that is that I was blessed to be able to live inside of an era and a time and get arrested and sentenced when things were different and shifting. First, I was 15 years old. I wasn't 35 years old and then having that moment of a 10-year sentence and knowing that at 45 is going to be challenging to restart a life. Once it finally sunk in, a few years later, and I started to build the mental stamina and tenacity that I knew that it was going to take to get me to all the way to my release date, I was still only 23 years old when I came home from prison. Now, that was one of the benefits, but also I was 23 years old and coming home from prison at the beginning of a tech era that started to see rapid advancement, something that the world had never seen before. Web 2.0 had just dropped, and it allowed my 23-year-old brain to be able to leverage how websites are allowing for commerce to happen. That started to shift the world, and we started to see not only what was happening inside of the real estate markets, what, a couple of years later landed in a pending recession, but that pending recession also allowed me to come home in a recession where everyone else was drowning in fear, and I was bursting with excitement and energy. And I knew that I could leverage that excitement and energy and create something inside a bustling construction industry inside of the Washington metropolitan area that wasn't really impacted by what was happening around the world. That's the fourth thing. I was released to Washington, D.C. and not inside of Dallas, Texas, or inside of Detroit, where they're driven by automotive industries that were collapsing at the time. The fifth thing was I had an amazing family that was praying for me, allowing me to be able to have a deep-rooted faith that allowed me to walk through every scenario with perspective. You see, having perspective is a magical thing. It's better than having courage and hope. And courage and hope are the two things that are only going things that allow you to have. But perspective allowed me to be able to walk through the world and be like, yo, my problems are so not problems. The problems that people are pointing out to me that are problems, like, yo, you don't have a car, you got to walk to work. I'm like, bro, I used to walk on a prison rec yard for miles every day, hoping and praying just to be able to see a sidewalk with grass on both sides of it. See, in your world, you don't even notice the grass on both sides of a sidewalk. In my world, I see grass, bruh, and I ain't seen grass in almost a decade. It's a different kind of grass. It looks like it's even greener, literally. And so as I think about the perspective that I had, it allowed me to be able to not self-identify with the carjacking Marcus, but this new world, this new perspective, this new faith, and this new hope that allowed me to be able to go out and say, yo, it don't matter people slamming doors in my face. Real talk, like, yo, again, Spider and Andy will cut their right arms off to be able to just go in and sit in front of a woman. I had an interview with a woman today, with a woman. I've been around men for the last almost decade of my life, right? Those little small things, I was able to go to the refrigerator and get something out. How magical is that, right? So all of those things, I think, collectively allow me to be able to create a new identity for myself as a 23-year-old man. Now, let's pivot to the second question around the, like, what do you say to people that, like, yo, you should have got locked up? Real talk. Like, so here's the thing. If I walk out of my house right now, after this call, and someone pulls a gun out on me and takes my car, Marcus, do you think that they should get arrested? Let me tell you the very first thing I'm going to do. 911, somebody just robbed me and stole my car. Right? You know what I mean? Now, the person on the other end of that call is going to be the arresting, part of the team of the arresting officers that will potentially catch this person and give them the next several years of their lives taken away from them. So, like, I mean, dude, like, you mad that you got locked up, you know what I mean, for 8 years? Well, I'm not mad that I was arrested. I'm not mad, you know what I mean? For real, I'm not even mad about the bid, because to be honest, my silver lining is I have 8 years of market research inside of one of the most impactful companies in the App Store today. Now, there's that. But I'm not mad about the arrest, right? Because I think that there's something that has to happen when you get off line and off course and you need some type of correction. But I mean, I was a 15-year-old kid and I experienced puberty in prison, and something can't be right about that.
Well, plus you were a 15-year-old in adult prison.
In an adult maximum security prison.
Can you talk about because, we can read about juvenile detention facilities versus adult prison, but what's it like as a kid in an adult prison? And like you said, you went through puberty in this. How does that affect you at that age of your development as a human being?
Yeah, I lived in denial the first couple of years, so it allowed me I literally thought I was going home every weekend for 2 years straight. It wasn't until I met my homeboy, Danny B, who was in his mid-50s. I'm 17, and it's crazy, right? Prison is the only place where you can be 17, and one of your best friends is in their mid-50s. And so he and I were walking around the prison rec yard track, and I asked him how long he had been in. And he had told me he had served 31 years. And that was the moment that shifted things for me. Up until that moment, I lived in denial. And so everybody else was incarcerated, and I wasn't. I just happened to be there. And I would just read as much as I could to make sure that I could go back to high school and get my high school diploma once I got out in the next week or two. I would write my girlfriend every single day, write my mom. I would, write, my aunts and uncles, anybody I would ask my mother for the church directory and be like, give me the church directory. I'm going to write Miss Johnson, Miss Maxwell, and I'm going to write everybody. I ain't got a lot of time in my hands, you know what I mean? And people would write me back and they would talk about, what was going on in school, right? And so then I would have conversations on the prison rec yard about things that were going on in school, until I learned that the folks that was 40 and 50 years old didn't want to hear about what was happening at school in high school. They didn't want to hear what was going on in junior and senior year. They didn't want to hear about senior trip. And so what ended up happening is it built up a sense of callousness that they had that just rolled over and spilled on over to me. And so now, when I'm calling home, I no longer wanted to talk about that stuff either. I didn't want to hear about it. I didn't want to get the newest news, because I was influenced by the folks who, were able to cloud my head with their jaded judgment of being in prison and not having any kind of family connectivity there. They hadn't had any family connectivity themselves for the llast 5 or 6 years. And here I come with my blessed behind, able to call home. And my mom was willing to accept those $18, 15-minute collect calls. Most people didn't have that. My mom was willing to write me letters, and my girlfriend was writing me back, because she would do it after school when she was doing her homework. People didn't have people that were writing them back. And so while my experience was different than most that were there, it ended up happening was, while their callousness was brewing over and creating this new Marcus, that's when depression started to set in. The hopelessness started to set in. And my cell partner had life plus 43. I'm 17, 18 years old with a cell partner that got life. And he always talking about how he's going to die in prison. I'm naturally thinking I'm going to die in prison. It's what us humans do. We adapt to our surroundings, and we become the birds that flock with those feathers. And so when my mom made that promise to me saying, she saw it and she's like, look, there's no way that I'm going to allow for this to happen. There's no way I'm going to allow you to turn into this callous, hurtful. I was hurtful. I would say things to my mom that was hurt. I'm like, look, Mom, start grieving now. I'm going to die here. Richmond is beefing with DC. I'm from DC. I'm locked up in Virginia. Everybody here is from Virginia. I'm one of 6 people here from DC. And every morning I got to wake up and make sure I know where my lawnmower blade is, and I got to carry it in my coat, because I got to be war ready at any moment. Mom, I don't have time to be talking about what's going on in church and your friends and what's happening at your office and your job and why the FDA medical library is staffing new people. I don't care about you and working at no daggone FDA, Mom. Look, start grieving me now and don't come see me anymore. I'm not going to write you anymore. I'm not going to call. Let me go, because this is my new world. And my mom she was, such a mom. She's like, boy, you have lost your mind. I hear all that stuff you talking. You done gone crazy. I knew they doing something to you. They doing something to you. If you think that I'm going to let you go to this prison culture and let you die behind bars as if I have nothing to say. I may not be able to be there to wrap my arms around you. I may not be there to be able to read to you or to do homework with you. I may not be able to share a bowl of chili and cornbread with you. But what I will do is I make sure that every one of those cornbread and chili moments, I'm going to include you in it. So I'm going to take a picture of it. I'm going to take a picture of what's happening in church. I'm going to take a picture of what's going on in my office. I'm going to write you a letter about it. And you're going to see that there's a world that's outside of that world that you're in that's waiting for you to come home. She did that every day for the remaining 6 years of my life, of my sentence. And that's what really connected and kept me connected. And that level of love, it's a prime example of how love can overshadow the worst and most harshest conditions literally in the country. And it brought me out to be able to be the man that I am today. And I'm so grateful for her for that.
I mean, I don't know about you, Misasha, but that just tapped into the mama bear in me.
Oh, totally.
I love your mom. Like, your mom sounds incredible, right?
She's amazing, amazing. And now, when it wasn't until, it's interesting, right? When you go to prison, you think that, it was me. I would always talk about how, Ma, you don't understand. I'm in here. I'm the one that's doing this time. You don't understand what it's like to wake up every morning and have the same day repeated every day all over again. You know what it's like to have somebody telling you when you can go to the bathroom, when you can go to sleep, when you have to wake up. You better make your bed. You don't know what it's like to be able to want to refute that, and then you got 7 guards coming in there with belly ties and buttons, and they beating you up and then dragging you to another cell, lock you in there without any daylight, with only water, and bring you back out and saying you're going to act right now, knowing that there's no recourse. Ain't no body cams. There's nothing. You just in there, and you got to deal with it. And there's no one to snitch to. You can't tell anybody. There's no governance for this. You don't understand this, Mom. And she's like, Marcus, you don't understand what it's like to come home from work every day and knowing there's nothing you can do to help protect your 15-year-old son. You know what it's like to be able to know that I'm coming home and I'm cooking dinner because I'm accustomed for years, decades even, of cooking dinner for multiple people. And every day I still come home for multiple people and set a plate, and before I realize that there's no one that's going to sit across from me. And I sit there and I got to cry every single night. And there's no one that I can call to be able to say that you understand this. You know why? Because they don't know what it's like to have a 15-year-old kid inside of prison. And if they don't, you know what they do? They always look at me funny like, oh, were you a good parent? Were you a good mom? What could you have done to mitigate him from going to prison? And now I got to walk around feeling like I'm a horrible person. So I got to be a recluse. I can't go to church. I can't hang out after school. I can't hang out at other events. And even more so, I can't even afford it. You know why? Because your phone calls are $18 for 15 minutes. I got a $700 a month phone bill every month that I can't even afford to live in my 3-bedroom apartment anymore. I got to go move into efficiency just to make sure that you can call home, just so I can make sure you're alive. And you better call me every day, because I need to make sure that you're alive every day, because you're my son, and I need to know. And if you don't call me, I'm called down to that warden, and I'm going to find out if you're alive. And I don't care if they say that this is a prison, ma'am. You're going to go find out if my son is alive. And it was interesting because I had to sit there and I had to digest all of that. And I had to know that I wasn't the only one that was incarcerated. It wasn't just me. For the next several years of my life, my mom would have to endure in the level of pain that I put her through out of what decision I made in a 15-second span in a mall parking lot. What kind of son am I? And that's how I had to begin to deal with that as well.
I do love your mother. I think that she's amazing. But just hearing what you're going through, what she's going through, how you both are having your experiences separately, and how, you need each other at the same time, and how that just, to me, reinforces that humanity that, that is separated and broken when we are incarcerating people, and when we do remove them from those ties and sever those ties. So it makes what you're doing right now even more important. But I also, you're in this place of depression or cynicism and callousness, and you've sort of come to this mindset where, based on what you've heard from people telling you, that you're going to die in prison, and your mom's fighting to keep you out of that mindset. So where does that change come? Like, she starts sending you these letters and photos, and I'm assuming it's not like a, 180, suddenly you're starting to get these and you're like, bam, I'm back. I have hope. So can you talk about that process? Like, what was that? How did that happen for you?
Yeah, it was interesting. I think that it was a collection of those moments. And it wasn't just my mom, right? It was like my mom and her making that commitment to me, but also seeing the lack of others not having that same experience, right? Like, that will also give you perspective, because it allowed you to see, even in that moment, I was privileged. And we all, most of us at least, once we come to one certain tipping point in our own lives, in our own maturations of adulthood, I think that we begin to appreciate those moments of privilege differently. And then there's stages of it, right? Because I think that even now, right, there's a level of privilege that I have that I am like every freaking day trying to figure out ways to leverage it for others. And I think that majority of us, once we have that moment and that realization, we all start to chip in into, and tap into that moment of humanity in ourselves. And I think that that's what ended up happening for me, where it was like my friends, like, they were all looking at me like, dude, your level of privilege is like, right, I'm in prison, right? Your level of privilege is amazing. Like, you're literally the most privileged person here. First of all, you're 17 years old. You're going to go home at 23. Like, I'm 30 now. You know what I mean? Like, dude, when you go home, you live to see 80, you got 60 more years of this. You know what I mean? Right? So one, two, you have family members who actually care about you and support you through the journey, right? Because like, it's with anything, right? Like, you know, out of sight, out of mind. In prison, you know, you go on for 2 weeks, you know, 2 weeks, and it turns into 6 months. 6 months turn into 2 years, and next thing you know, you're like, oh yeah, I have a cousin in jail. He's been in jail for 4 or 5 years, and you don't think about him any longer, right? And so now when that cousin is my cell partner, they're like, yo, all of their family members have faded out of their lives over the years, and mine is still there, right? And then on top, like, all of these levels of privilege, you know what I mean, they're compounding, and I'm thinking about it, and I'm realizing there's a level of awareness level of self-awareness that was overcoming me. And so my mom, her letters allowed me to be able to connect in a different way. And so now I'm like, yo, you know, I can have conversations with my mom expressing that privilege, right? I can be like, yo, you know, I can be like, Mom, when I come home, I want to start this business. And this kind of business I want to start. And I want to start learning about the stock market. And this is the reasons why. And I feel like if I learn and if I save my money for the next 3 years on my commissary, I'll be able to send money home to you, Mom. I'll be able to do this. I can start my first business when I come home. Or I can invest in my first, 4 or 5 companies in my stock portfolio when I come home. And my mom was reading these new letters from this new market. Like, you want to do, wait a minute, wait, what? Like, what? Like, FICO, what are you talking about? You know what I mean? Like, it was like I wanted a subscription to Condé Nast Traveler magazine because I was so fascinated by these different beaches, that had these bungalows that, tripped out into the water. And I'm like, yo, Tahiti sounds like the move, right? And then I started learning about other places, and then I became fascinated by these other vacation spots. I would read articles about how, you couldn't fly in on a commercial jetliner to St. Bart's. And so you had to fly like this one island and then up on another. And I'm like, yo, that's a whole other way of vacation than when you got to catch, like, how you do that? And how much does that vacation cost? And then I started learning, you hear the rap songs, they talk about Rolexes, and that was cool and that was dope. But then I read the articles about CEOs who had just purchased, they didn't purchase watches, they started purchasing timepieces to give to their heirs called Vacheron Constantines. I'm like, wait a minute, Vaca who the what? How do you pronounce that? Where do they buy that at? Where's Genevieve? Like, how do you get there? I want to know what this is, right? Because apparently they make the best watch. And for $700,000 for a watch, I didn't know, right? And so this different new market started to evolve, and my mom saw it and she started to feed it. And she was like, look, this is amazing. Like, I will get you as many magazine subscriptions as you want. I'll do is it. And then she started writing me about stuff. And I'm like, Mom, like, can you research how to buy a Foot Locker? And she's like, can you buy Foot Locker? I'm like, I don't know, but I feel like somebody got to own it, right? And so then we learned about what franchise was. I'm like, a franchise? Really? Okay, McDonald's, I see you, right? And so then I started learning about what balance sheets were and profit and loss. So now I'm like 6 months away from coming home. And I'm like, yo, I can't wait till they pop the doors. All they got to do is pop the doors, and I'm pressing the go button. And it's going to look like literally like a Staples commercial. That was easy.
What I heard, I'm laughing at this because I'm so glad you had that. But the turning point sounded like it was that connection, in contrast with, how do I refer to it? Your fellow inmates, but you're not supposed to use what's the phrase that I'm supposed to use? Like the fellow people who were in prison? Do a quick vocabulary check here.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. So we want to try to eradicate the word inmate or convicts, because when you led the conversation within the beginning, talking, attributing a level of humanity to people that were there, right? Or the people that are still there, or like the people that came home, or people like me. If you love me, just don't use that word. So what I would say, when I refer to my boys, I'm like, yo, literally, they were my boys. They were my friends. And I guess, if I was in college, I would probably, if I was talking to someone, I probably would say my college roommate or something, right? And so I would, if I was talking about, but I would probably say my friend, like my friend John, you know what I mean? Like, I was with John, you know what I mean? But in prison, I would probably, for my friends, I'm like, yo, the dudes I was locked up with, or my friends or something. But anyway, go back to your question, you asked me about my friends. What about it?
Yeah. So, there's a couple questions about what's it like inside where, the dynamic movies portray the conversations between people who are in prison is everyone's like, no, I didn't do it. I'm innocent. What are and yet, so also when we read Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, 19% of people were in prison for a violent crime in her book and the statistics, which is probably the category that you would fall into, versus a lot of people in prison for like really minor drug crimes, right?
Yeah.
Do you talk about the crimes that brought you into, or the situations that brought you into prison when you're inside? Like, what are the conversations like with your friends? Because like you said, you were bringing hope and this stuff, and then there was a lot of cynicism, but like, what is conversation like with your friends?
It really is a microcosm of what it is we experience out here today, right? Like the majority of folks who I talk to on a regular basis, unless I have a deep-rooted conversation with them, I won't know what college they went to or what got them to want to choose a major, right? It's the same way in prison. It literally is the same way, right? Like my boys, my best friends, the ones who I have real deep rooted relationships with, it's kind of hard to not, like you in prison, you know what I mean? Ain't you my cell partner? Like, dude, we've been in cell for 5 years. I know everything. Not only do I know what brought you to prison, I know your 6th grade teacher's best friend's name. I know about that one time you fell. We had like an old Murray killer. I know everything there is to know about you, right? And so there's that. Is there a culture of like, yo, I didn't do it or all that? Not really. Like that's all TV. Like because the media is going to depict people that are living in these cells as like what they want. You got to be able to justify making the decision to send someone away for 70 years. So, in that justification, what it doesn't look like is showing a bunch of people on a TV screen that look like a wreck yard full of Marcuses. Contrary to the media's portrayal, there are a wreck yard full of Marcuses that are waiting for and praying for that opportunity. Right? They're all right now playing the same stock market game right now, writing me today. Like, yo, Marcus, did you ride that wave of that Tesla wave? It was up 444%. They just had a 5-to-1 split. Yo, I hope you got in on that. And I'm like, yeah, man, but the split really don't mean nothing. They're like, nah, but you check Apple. They had a 4-to-1 right now. And right now, even though it's down a week, on 7%, right? These are the letters I'm getting from people in prison. Mind you, some of my best friends out here in the community can't articulate what's happening in the markets right now. Or they can't tell me what kind of legal structure to be able to start their business out with and why an LLC is probably better than an escort. And I'm not a lawyer. So if any of you guys listening to that, I'm not saying that the LLC is better than an escort. Please consult your legal. So, you know what I mean? But like, you know what I mean? My friends there, you know what I mean? Like, and like, that's what ends up happening, right? It's like a culture full of people that are saying like, yo, I tricked up. I carjacked somebody. Or yeah, man, I got caught with, 2 bricks of coke in a trunk and a gun, and now I'm here, and now I'm trying to figure out a way to be able to figure out how to be the next CEO of, Pepsi, right? And they're that ambitious, by the way. Like that was not an exaggeration. Right now, folks are not sitting. The reality of it is the folks that are like, yo, I come home, get a job, and like my mom suffered from the same, previous ideas of like what should look like coming home. She's like, yo, that's what you get a job. If you need to get a job at McDonald's or this, I'm like, get a job. I would. Not saying that I don't, because like some of my best friends, started their careers working at McDonald's, right? So not that, but I just didn't aspire to that, Mom. I want to be a sales rep at Xerox. You know what I mean? And she's like, well, and so people that are sitting in those sales, the reality of it is it's not until you come home from prison and you apply for a job at the job and you get beat up every day before you realize like, yo, all right, I guess I got to settle for either my tribe or whatever, right? But most folks there, they sit in right now. They're like, yo, I want to go work at Goldman Sachs. And in my head, I'm thinking like, so what's your path to Goldman Sachs? I want to hear this. I need to hear this because this is going to be very entertaining. Somehow, some of them get up, make it there. I'm one of the blessed ones.
What you just said was, I feel like in stark contrast to, again, what movies and also what you alluded to, like the violence and the needing to protect yourself. And, how does that come into play inside the prison system?
Yeah. I mean, it's the same, again, another microcosm, right? Like a small pocket of the population are experiencing levels of anger or distrust or humiliation or jealousy, envy, or any of the reasons, or some of them, because of the lack. And so, because there is a part of the population, again, it's microcosm. So there is a part of the population, there's classes in prison, right? There's a upper class in prison, a middle class person, the upper class person who doesn't have a job at the prison. They don't go to work anywhere, but they came to prison, they got locked up with a lot of money, or their family members got a lot of money. And so they send them a bunch of money and they don't have to do nothing but sit there and watch TV and buy stuff from commissary and go play sports and basketball. And they just do their time. They just coast through. Then there's a middle class, right? Like same level of privilege. There's a middle class, a person that actually has jobs. They work and they get paid $30 a month, and they're able to buy the bare necessities like soap and soap powder and detergent and underclothes and all that kind of stuff. And they're making it through, right? And they're thinking and praying, hopefully, that one day they'll make parole and they'll be able to either graduate to an upper class somehow through some magical job in a prison because they'll get transferred to a prison that has a higher paying job, or they try to keep the job they have to not be a part of the lower class. The lower class are the people who either don't work, don't have a job, don't want to get a job, can't find a job, keep getting fired from job. Most of them have mental health issues, and the prison administration, they aren't excited about trying to figure out how to solve mental health problems. COs don't get paid enough for that. Correctional officers don't get paid enough for that. So they're like, yo, look, you don't have mental problems. You just a nut. I'm going to put you in a hole. And so they get relegated to the bottom, just like people in prison do out here in the community. And they get thrown in the jail of the jail. The hole is jail inside of jail, solitary confinement, right? You're in a jail inside of jail. And so it's the same way. So we mimic the world that you see. The world out here is mimicked inside of prison. Yeah, that.
Which then leads me to healthcare then, right? Like, because surely sometime during the 8 years you were inside, you get a cold, you get sick. How does that happen in prison?
Same way. If you're part of the privileged few and you have cash on your books and you can afford to go to medical because you can afford to pay the copay, or you can afford the medications that they're going to need to order for you in order to be able to make it through your whatever condition it is, then you're good. If you have been classified as an indigent person inside of the cells, then maybe you can qualify for some type of medical health care coverage that will allow you to have some of those medications. If you're a part of the middle class, then yeah, you're going to spend your whole check paying for Medicare like you would if you were out here in the streets. The interesting thing about that is that it transfers, like the lower caste system transfers once you're released from prison. And so now if you had diabetes and you were indigent and you were able to get medication for your diabetic conditions, now you come home from prison, you still indigent because you didn't have those same supports while you were there. You came home, likelihood of you having supporting staff, a supporting team is low. And so now you come home and now you're a diabetic and you aren't able to afford those medications. And then you end up like my boy Fats, who came after serving, 14 years and came home after 14 years and 6 months after he passed away after going into a diabetic coma.
So you're in this system, you're seeing this happening. You went through puberty, in prison. You've got these big dreams now because now you've got the magazines and, you want to go to Geneva and you've got these like watches and you have all these dreams. And then, that day comes, you get out. How does that translate into your life outside of prison? Like you're 23, you're back with your mom, where do you go? Can you talk to me about that?
Yeah, I mean, when I first came home, I didn't know what I was doing. I had all of the aspirations of doing these amazing things without any resources, right? I did have a massive amount of love, though, right, and support from my mom, who allowed me to be able to come home with the flexibility of saying, just don't go back. You don't got to worry about paying any bills. A lot of people don't, there are tons of people that don't have that, right? I had safe and adequate housing, right? My mom had a home that I was able to come home to. I had my own bedroom. It was mine. I had a key to the house, right? I was good to go, right? It was in a safe neighborhood, right? It didn't look like the neighborhoods that we used to live in when I was younger. And so that was a big plus. Monday turned into Tuesday turned into Wednesday, and that sense of gratefulness that I had allowed me to just move through the world. The same disillusioned Marcus that I was at the beginning of my prison sentence. I came home and was a different level of glee. I couldn't imagine life being any better than it was. It was holy crap. The level of, it was consistent euphoria. There was it was no way to describe it outside of massive dopamine every day simply by waking up and putting my feet out of the bed, right? It was I just walk around, to this day, I just can't stop smiling, right? When I think about it, I can't believe this is my life. And that was the day that was it back in February of 2004. And it literally right now, I'm still having the same sentiments today where I'm yo, this is amazing. You know what I mean? And over time, I had to learn how to do the things communicate with other people, how to have a conversation about things that weren't just prison related, right? Or how to overcome some of the tech challenges I had when I first came home, because I went to prison and there was no internet. And then I came home, it was Google. I'm yo, this is crazy. You know what I mean? The complete world changed. And so there was a lift there. But then finally I landed on a job. I got a job. I applied for a bunch of them. I got told no a lot. My first bunch of set of jobs, I got told no. And interestingly enough, most people get defeated. Again, I'm coming back home to a mom that was oh, don't worry about it. And I wasn't smart enough to know that it was likely that the next person was going to tell me no again. I was so naive. I'm oh yeah, well, that was only this one group. I'm way smarter. I'm I feel like I can get a job here. Like, I just feel like this one company could definitely hire me, right? And I would feel that way every day until one paint company, they did give me a gig. I was the guy mixing paint on the, off the shelf. And I was able to take that job at the paint store that was mixing paint for customers who wanted to come and get their kitchens painted, with an opportunity that was presented to me from customers who just wanted to find out how much it costs for me to come paint kitchens. And I'm like, well, when I don't paint kitchens, I work in a paint store. I'm like the dude at Home Depot with the orange apron that's going to give you this aquamarine blue. Like, that's me. I ain't painting kitchens though. But it was the customers at the paint store that would come in and they would complain about it not being any work, because we were now in the mid 2000s. People were fearful of this new pending recession. Folks were getting laid off in the construction industries. I saw that as an opportunity to create a painting business that allowed me to be the conduit to connect the Miss Johnsons of the world that wanted their kitchens painted and the painters who were complaining about it not being any work. We were able to grow that small painting business to a construction firm over the years, and that was a fun part of the journey.
You glossed over this a little bit. You were like, yeah, I applied to some jobs. Am I correct? When you applied to some jobs and got rejected, you applied to 41 jobs and got rejected and got job 42, correct?
41 total. The 42nd said yes.
I mean, that's a lot of perseverance and like capacity to tolerate rejection, which I don't think on the best day, many humans have that kind of resilience. And so it speaks to your character and also the foundation that your mom set up, but like, that's a lot. Like, were you asked on all of those jobs about that really painful question of like, have you been like convicted of a felony?
Have you been convicted of a felony? That was always the disqualifier. And the reality of it is that, Sarah, like in hindsight, like having this conversation and saying it to you all and having those journal entries, looking back on all of those different companies and stores, retail stores and mortgage brokers and grocery stores and the delivery spots and all those places that told me no. It wasn't until much later when people were like, yo, you got told no 41 times? Yo, that's a lot. And I was like, really? The 42nd told me yes, though, right? I'm winning, right? And I think that what ended up happening is, like, again, going back to that perspective thing, growing up in an environment when, like, I got told no literally 365 times, 8 years straight. You know what I mean? Like, for years, you know what I mean? And so, like, having a 6-month run of being told no and then on the 7th or 8th month getting told yes, it was like, oh, I am winning. It was only 41 people that told me no. It wasn't until later after I learned of others' experience, I was like, yo, 41 people told me no, right? Because before that, I was like, oh, yeah, I'm expecting at least the first 200. So if I made it before 100 and I'm getting paid $1 more than minimum wage, right? Like, I wouldn't get paid minimum wage. It was $1 more than minimum wage. I am super winning. And they let me get overtime. Like, say all the way less. I'm there.
I think one of the things we want to talk about is like companies who employ returning citizens. I mean, I think, like, is there a database out there of companies that are doing that? I feel like that's a conversation that's really important, is like, what would you say to people who are hesitant about hiring returning citizens? Because
they're stupid. Yeah,
they still do?
Yeah, they're stupid. That's all. They just stupid. No, I'm joking. That was horrible. None of you guys, you guys aren't stupid. You're just ignorant because you just don't know. You haven't met a Marcus. We started the conversation off like, you haven't met a Marcus. Because once you meet a Marcus, then you're like, yo, like, I can boost my sales in a very demonstrative way by this small group of people. We learned that way more loyal. They want a job so desperately, they ain't never going to leave. Like, we don't have to worry about turnover. So employment, they ain't trying to go nowhere. And they're very accustomed to being somewhere for a lot of years, right? Like, they're the ones who want to learn. They want to evolve. They want to grow. They want to prove to the community that they're more than that sticker that they have on their back that has an inmate number attached to it. There's so much desire for success there that they're obviously going just to outperform most. You aren't going to outwork me. I mean, your definition of hard work just doesn't mirror my definition of hard work. It's the things that I had to do in order to be able to get here, to be this CEO of this kind of company in this era that has my skin color with my background. The work that I had to do to get here, I feel very confident with saying most people just won't outwork me. And it's not because it's not because I wake up every morning saying you won't outwork me. It's because the natural in-depth fabric of Marcus that was created as a result of this horrible time of my life has built something that's a machine that can't be rumbled with. And so what I tell the others are, There are tons of machines that are waiting for you. The reality of it is that you have to be the one that is accepting enough to understand that there's probably going to be some communication shifts. They're going to use some terms that you aren't going to know. They're going to dress a different way. They are. Their hair is going to look a little different, and that's okay. Their children are going to speak different, and they probably are going to text and use FaceTime versus email. It's the reality of a changing and evolving world. But these are the levels of innovations that will allow your businesses to be able to thrive. And if you're looking to move past all of the stale things that you've done in the past that continue to not work, but you continue to replicate them over and over again, here's a different solution. Hire somebody to look like me. I promise you. It's going to work out.
That's awesome. I don't have a company, but I would hire you or a you replica. What about the social aspect? Because I want to talk about the barriers of that process of returning. It doesn't sound like the prison complex itself trains people to return successfully. That's why your company is here, and we will definitely continue to talk about your company. What about returning as a citizen and the socializing? Because you talked about your mom being an incredible support for you, but so many people have lost touch with their families over the years while they were inside. What should people be doing differently or thinking differently about the socializing side of things?
I mean, I feel like, the first part of it is changing the dinner table conversation. That's the first part, right? And having, shifting the conversation and introducing this one into it, right? It allows you to be able to hear about the stories of my mom and my sister and my wife and my 2 children and my best friends who are in prison. And I think that what it does is when you change the dinner table conversations, it allows you to change your own perspective in your own way, whether it be through your friendship circles and the folks that live in your neighborhood, creating a level of empathy with them, or whether it be in your HR departments when you're thinking about hiring someone, or in your marketing departments when you're thinking about communicating with a group of people who are probably maybe even your target customers but don't know how to be able to do it. And you're thinking, who should I hire to bring them in to run this? Or as you think about, what schools you go, your children go to and their friends and how they engage with them, and then how you engage with the parents there and having a different kind of conversation there as a result of you being a little bit more educated around what's happening inside of the community that doesn't look like yours. And I think that, once we change the dinner table conversations, you're going to get all of that. The second part of that wave, I think, is figuring out ways to be able to be supportive of those who have either companies or organizations that are being led by folks that are returning citizens. What it does is it signals to not only the company and those team members, but to the entire community that this is a worthwhile cause. Most times people that are, and especially during this new evolving conversation around justice reform, the companies that are being intentional about bringing this community of people into their organizations or into their leadership, they are probably a social impact organization, or they're in the tech sectors. That's what we're seeing, the trends harming toward. And because of that, then especially most specifically inside of the social impact sectors, when we think about whether it's philanthropic capital, venture capital, or the companies that we do business with, we like to think of these companies as worthwhile donations and not places that we should be investing our time, resources, and make real capital investments. And I think that when we begin to shift the ideal of it being a place where I'm just doing good, but shifting it to now saying that this is a company that is scalable, that can create real great good inside of the world. Now we're shifting again, not only just the dinner table conversations, but how we present ourselves, leveraging the economic strength, which typically is always the determining factor as to who gets the opportunity to accelerate inside of any community. And so when we are able to figure out real ways to be able to back some of these businesses, and back them meaning become customers of them, hire them, when you send out your RFPs, being intentional about seeking out the businesses that are being led by teams that look like mine, or have people in their leadership that look like mine, or even serving customers that look like ours, then I think that, you're doing something that's bigger than just, doing business with someone or investing in them. You're investing in an entire community. One of the things that I think that was interesting about what we saw inside of the communities in any other place, and I'll take any other place we saw a huge, massive growth. Like I think about what happened in Silicon Valley. I think about what happened in the West Coast and the tech sectors, right? Like we saw massive explosion of growth with trillions of dollars in mass cap companies coming out over the last decade or two. And we have been very, very clear about ways to be able to invest and be able to ensure that we see the kind of growth there. And it's all as a result of, what people are doing? Writing a check. It was a bunch of folks that said, we're going to write a check. We believe in this group of people that are going to be building solutions that are going to take us into the future forward. And now when we think about other conversations that have to be had inside of wanting to create another big wave of growth inside of this other community, we try to figure out other ways to be able to solve the problem by either mentoring our way out of the problem or protesting or talking our way out of the problem, instead of just saying, how about we actually make investments and write the check? The same thing that happened for this wave of people. It wasn't a study. We ain't had panel discussions. We ain't bring together congressmen and all that. No, you know what we did? We got our wealthy elite to come together and say, we're going to write a check and we're going to create a wave. The same thing can happen here. When you see more folks investing in people who look like me, you'll see a massive shift in the way that our country views equity.
I loved everything about that. I want to talk about Flickshop, in particular Flickshop Angels and the Flickshop School of Business, because I think you have created something that is so expansive and considers so many parts of what you've learned and experienced. I'm sure that from that mixing the paint and creating that company to now Flickshop, like the rooms and the circles and the conversations that you have are now with very different groups of people. I want to talk about how that evolution has affected like what you say or how you say, that message.
Thank you for bringing, for bringing up Flickshop Angels and FSB, and I'll talk about that in a second. It has been an interesting journey, right? Like you can imagine, like the amount of social capital that I have now is different than what, we experienced previously, right? Some of my best friends, they look at me now like I'm the one that made it. They're like, oh, here go Marcus, right? You're like, I'm the one that made it, right? And that's been fun. And I think it's been interesting because what that also does, it gives me an opportunity to, to be the one that helps to shape those same kind of dinner table conversations that I just talked about. There's a heavy responsibility that comes along with that. It's massive, but I think that we're doing a good job of managing it thus far. It's important to me to not only figure out ways to be able to build the solutions that give back and contribute to the communities where I come from and service the families the way that we do. And even with our technology, we're thoughtful about, not just people that are incarcerated, right? Like families in general. I mean, there are people who leverage our technology today to send postcards to their grandparents in senior living facilities, or they use Flickshop to send postcards to their loved ones at basic training when they're getting deployed after, signing up to be in the military. There are folks who've used our technology to send postcards to their children when they go to these summer camps and they don't have access to their social networks or cell phones, but they can only write letters and receive mail. So we're heavily rooted in family. Now, we specifically target folks who are incarcerated with Flickshop in our branding because we understand that this is typically the population of folks who are going to get boxed out. And so we wanted to be able to make sure that they had a way to receive the same amount of love that some of those others can receive, even if they want to just go on Facebook and see it. And there's knowing that this population cannot. So when we did that, it was interesting because we learned that the people that would leverage our technology in those ways that created identifiers for us. And we were like, yo, the same way. These were folks that were like, why would I communicate with someone in prison? And I'm like, yo, but you just sent a postcard to your grandmother in senior living facility. So you understand the value of family connectivity and what it means for you and your grandmother even. Because you didn't even send this postcard for you. You sent this because you knew the reaction it was going to cause when your grandmother got her name called by the person at the front desk at Sunrise Senior Assisted Living Center, right? The same reaction that you wanted for her is the same reaction that I wanted for my friends. And I think that level of alignment has created some empathy that I couldn't have even dreamt about when we launched Flickshop, which has been very, very interesting. What ended up happening with Flickshop Angels was the result of, interestingly enough, John Legend, the music artist, him leveraging to send postcards to people and wanting to figure out how to help other families create that same wave in the circles and the communities that even couldn't afford the 99 cents. Because while our Flickshop postcards are only $1, for some communities, that's even a massive amount of money to talk about taking from another part of your monthly expenses. And so he purchased a bunch of Flickshop credits and became our first Flickshop Angel that we gave to children with incarcerated parents. And that was very, very interesting because we learned very quickly that these kids wanted to send selfies to their moms and dads by the droves. And the biggest barrier was the fact they had to ask auntie and uncle for their credit cards. And so we were wondering, how can we do this at scale? And we launched flickshopangels.com to be able to do that so that our community members can band together and support children with incarcerated parents all around the country. And so we partner with organizations that support these children, giving them these small Flickshop gift cards that are preloaded with Flickshop credits, allowing them to send those selfies to mom and dad. And it's been incredible to see how the community is pouring out love, with the majority of them saying, Marcus, I've never had anyone incarcerated in my family, but I know how important this is. And so I want to be able to contribute. And that's been an amazing, amazing part of this journey.
I'm already like, all right, cool. So we'll definitely tell everybody about Flickshop Angels and about the platform. Just in terms of now reflecting on, you mentioned several times this idea of like the $18 like friggin' phone calls and the crazy predatory practices of the prison phone systems and communication. Obviously, it sounds to me like that should change. Are there other things when you reflect back on this time, aside from this building, the critical part of building empathy and really having people focus on the humanity of everybody involved in this system at their dinner table we should all be talking about the fact that we're all people. Are there any other systems or things that you would want to see changed about the way the system is run?
The system is designed to run the way it's been running, right? This is the way it was designed. And so there's a ton of things. And just to be clear, so I am a mass incarceration abolitionist. I believe that we can do we can take the very, very clear steps to be able to reduce our prison population by, historical numbers very, very quickly with a series of steps. A few of them, are going to be, where we're going to be building a bunch of our technologies, which is around reentry planning and recidivism prevention tactics. Thinking through how to involve the community and how to involve the credible messengers, the folks who are the Marcuses and the Dwaynes. Dwayne is my co-defendant. He's an attorney, and he was my co-defendant at the time. He was 16, I was 15. And today, he's getting his doctorate at Yale Law, and it's incredible to see him come out of his federal clerkship after writing his most latest award-winning book. There are people in prison that need to know that story. If you're sitting in prison right now and you want to write a book, right? Like Dwayne is the person that you need to see, the person you need to be in front of, that he needs to be in front of you so that you can know that it's possible. Because again, you can't be what you can't see. Thinking through how to be able to build the technologies that allow for that kind of recidivism prevention and reentry strategies to happen. But on the policy side, there's some policy things that need to happen as well. And the policy, again, policy starts by changing the dinner table conversations. And part of what the work that we're doing is changing the narrative for what it looks like to have been in prison and to come home from prison, and what potential success can look like when we're supported in ways. My mom supported me. And there are a ton of people in the community that want to be able to be supportive. They just don't know how. And there's several organizations that are attaching themselves to the new policy advancements that will allow for a new wave of reform laws that to sweep through that will reduce the prison populations by big numbers. And a lot of those, you can find out more of them on the flickshop.com website for resources. And I think that the last thing, which I think is one of the biggest things that, we have to do across the country, is figure out ways to be able to build anti-racist policies inside of all of our either organizations or businesses, and even inside of our homes, that will allow us to be able to really, really, really impact what's happening and sweeping across the country when we think about what's going on inside of the bracelets that are ending up on Black and brown people. Right. And that's an interesting thing of it is that we're starting to see as a result of the media, and I won't even spend a ton of time here, but we're starting to see that you're lucky if you end up actually getting bracelets put on you, end up making it to the back of the patrol car and going to prison. You're one of the lucky ones, because there's so many other people as a result of some of these same racist policies and racist conversations that are happening inside of these companies and these corporations and these police departments and these courtrooms are resulting in people dying at the hand of it. And so as we think about how to systemically eradicate this era of mass incarceration, we focus on how to prevent people from going back to prison once released, because it's not just enough to be able to focus on census and reform laws. And we're starting to learn as a result of, the first conversations when Obama was in office and he started to change those crack versus cocaine laws, we started to learn that this was a major problem. But that's the first one. And then the second one, again, is those policy conversations. And the third one being, again, building these anti-racist policies.
Well, and just really quickly, for people who are still new, I don't know how many listeners are new to this conversation, but like when you talk about some of those policies, in particular, people imagine incarceration as like what you mentioned, like the process of getting arrested, hopefully safely, and going through court and then being put in jail, prison, right? Like wherever you end up. Can you just briefly talk about the policies of re-entry that are really major barriers? I mean, you mentioned like that, have you been convicted of a felony box? Like what, the right to vote? Can you just talk about how you've seen that affect you and others who are returning?
I mean, we do know about, some of the things that are, as a result of, I think it's like 40,000 collateral consequences that have been identified as a result of having a felony, whether it be from, lack of, inability to gain gainful employment, to housing. Again, I talk about, where not only like where you can rent, but even where you can purchase because of HOA restrictions or lending requirements for certain types of loans that still have language that disqualify people with a felony conviction. I mean, there are places when I was running my construction company that I couldn't take projects as a result of my felony conviction. One of our largest projects, the project that was the most transformative for our company, which was with Baltimore Washington International Airport. Can you imagine their faces when I did my thumbprint signature, my thumbprint scan at TSA, and on the computer they were like, apply for your badge to be able to export. Now I'm the CEO of the company, of this painting company, won the contract already. We have a 5-year contract with the airport, right? And I'm not even thinking. I've been home for a couple of years. I've completely forgot. Yo, dude, you got a felony, right? But I'm going in and I'm going to go apply for my badge because you got to have a badge to work inside of the airport. And all of my employees have a badge, right? And as I think of, I'm going to be employing a bunch of other people, this new project is going to allow me to employ a lot of people. And hopefully I'll be able to employ one to have a felony conviction. I go in TSA, I scan my thumbprint, and the red light started flashing. It was like, dude, I'm like, you know what? I got to go to the bathroom and be right back, right? Walked out of that office and I had to go find someone. I had literally had to hire someone to work in my company to be a badged employee, because when you're a badged employee under TSA guidelines, you can escort up to 2 people through the airport as long as they have an ID, a valid driver's license. I had to literally hire someone to pay them just to escort the CEO around of the project because I couldn't work on my own job site that I was managing for the next 5 years, right? So it doesn't matter whether it's the guy who wants to be able to get a very small job or the person, the woman who wants to be able to start a massive construction business. The collateral consequences are immense. They are started in policies that originated around, again, that box that was presented on job applications that said, hey, have you been convicted of a felony? And then it spanned over to colleges and universities. And not only was it jobs, but colleges and universities started to put on their applications. On their admissions application, before you even apply here, have you been convicted of a felony? Because we don't want you walking on our campus if you have been. Right? Like these are things that are preventing folks. When you're getting released from prison, most of us are on probation or parole with a mandate that you must find a job and adequate housing or go to school. You got to do one of 3 or you're going to get violated and go back to prison. But they're on the flip side, as soon as you leave the appeals office, there are disqualifiers in each one of those 3 spaces to prevent you from doing that. The mandate to be successful, but yet creating barriers to be able to amass that success is something that most folks can't jump over. And that's just after prison. We aren't even talking about the laws, the policies that were driven before you even get to the actual prison cell. I'm talking about at the jail level, the juvenile policies that allow what policy was written. Who was the smartest? Who was the person that said, you know what? I'm not talking about when, political candidates were getting on TV saying, let's lock these 15, 16-year-olds up because they're super predators. We're not even talking about that rhetoric, right, that swept through the nation. That came out in the 94, 95, 96 elections that made my judge say, oh, you're a super predator. You're going to get a life sentence in prison. We're not going to go there. But the laws that said that it's just okay to send someone that's 15 years old to prison in general for 1 day, let alone for 8 years. There's something that needed to change on both sides of it. And one of the things that I'm proud of is working in between that. And it's one of the reasons why I sit on the board at the Justice Policy Institute, where we're very intentional about figuring out how to develop new policy, laws, and legislation that can overcome some of these issues that are putting Black and brown people in cells for decades at a time, and then even boxing them out for decades at a time after they release from prison as well.
I mean, I would just love to see some sort of training for people who are in a hiring position at companies to ask better questions. Like, how do you truly judge the character of a person? And how do you confront that? I mean, I think that how do you weed out the very few who really aren't the Marcuses, and how do you ask the right questions to assess someone's real character? I mean, I feel like that is just something that people aren't trained in and they're afraid of. So they take the easy way out and just check mark, you're gone. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think eventually, I feel like we struggle with that, whether or not, like, if I get a candidate of 5 people that just graduated from UPenn, like, I still have that same conundrum. You know what I mean? I think that the difference is that the checkbox, whatever the checkbox is, like whether or not it says convicted of a felony or not, or you just did a background search, right? Whatever that thing, that trigger was that alerted you to this person's background is now the disqualifier. It wasn't the fact that you gotten to the point where they became the potential candidate that allowed you to see that they weren't the right one for this role. It was like, yo, we looked and seen that this person had an inmate number before. And are they going to, and now it's fill in the blank, are they going to steal from us? Are they going to lie to us about this? Are they going to, right? It's all of those things, those question marks that are looming as a result of how you talked about media portraying people that have been in these cells that prevents from real progress.
I think that's just highlights the need to have these conversations like we've been talking about, the dinner conversations, the getting away from, the culture fit or the sort of the oblique references to someone who doesn't seem to fit into my box of what an employee or what a friend or what a person or someone that I want to have in my house or my company fits into neatly, right? Because we do label people and, just to continue to get stories out there and talk really about the humanity behind what goes into everything is so key. So, I really appreciate you spending this time with us and breaking it down for us in very real ways and answering all of our questions. Because when you said you were open to any question, we were like, dang, let's go for it. On that note, for 2 questions, one, if our listeners want to find out more about Flickshop, where do they go to find out more about that business and you in general? And 2, was there anything that we didn't ask that you want to share with our listeners?
Thank you so much. I mean, so again, thank you for having me, given the opportunity to be able to have this kind of conversation. I mean, again, my expectation is to shift the dinner table conversations. Then we have to figure out a way to be able to be open and willing to be able to have, answer some of the hard questions, right? It may be uncomfortable. In some rooms, it may be kind of sort of even squirmish, right? But I think that the more that we learn, and I think that, the most recent protests that we've seen started to sweep across the country in the most recent months have been a great signal to that, right? Like, the more that we are learning, the better off the country continue to grow to become. And while I'm extremely optimistic about us, reshaping or reimagining this new world that has anti-racist policies built inside of our own, not only just organizations and businesses, but in the fabric of our households, I think that, we'll begin to see this era of mass incarceration continue to push down. If you want to find out more information about me or Flickshop, it's all at flickshop.com, FLIKSHOP.com. No C. Most people put the C in there phonetically. I get it. You're supposed to put the C, but no, it's no C. FLIKSHOP. And, things that I think that we haven't talked about, one of the things that if there's anything else that I think that the country, that the listeners, I want them to walk away with is that my name is Marcus Bullock. I have a son. His name is Marcus Jr. And my daughter, her name is Aya. My mom's name is Sylvia, right? Like, this is a real family that had a real son that lived in a cell. And the vast majority of the country, they're fearful of me. They're fearful of that. When they see me walk in, I'm a tall, dark-skinned man, and if they know my background, they're even more fearful, right? And I want to be able to be the one that says, don't be scared. Like, I'm a person, and I think that the more conversations we have and raise the level of humanity around that and really tell the stories of the people that are sitting in these cells or they're living in some of the neighborhoods that you wouldn't dream driving through, I think that you'll realize, like, there are waves of innovation that are waiting. There are waves of solution. There's even buckets full of love that is on the other side of that fear. And this is just one more notch to be able to break that notch of fear down for you. And I hope that I'll be able to give each one of you guys a hug over time, because I believe that love can overcome.
You've been listening to What Do You Mean by That? A show dedicated to being better humans and getting loud for all of us. Hat tip to Sarah's daughter for the logo, and huge thanks to Misasha's son for our incredible theme music. Find out more and subscribe to our newsletter at whatdoyoumeanbythat.com. Because as always, it's all of us or it's none of us.